everyone said to me, how could you write a book and not get any money for it? I was like, it was the best investment of my life. The best investment. I got to spend 3 months with Ruth DeBusk writing a book. I went from being the most nobody person in the world of nutrition and genetics. And because I wrote a book with the number one person in nutrition genetics and our names were on the book together, you go from being nothing to being number two.
Amazing.
Because she was number one and I wrote a book with her. And we are still, in fact, I'm meeting her tomorrow. We are still working together 25 years later. We still work together. She moved on from Nutrigenomics to functional nutrition. She always says she handed over the baton to me. Everything that she would teach, I would kind of take over from her. We wrote the book together. We published it. We spoke together. We wrote articles together. And it's just, and we still are friends and we colleagues. And she gave me that opportunity. This is my and I remember going to her to say, should I do a PhD? Because, and she's like, you don't need one. You already know more about nutrigenomics than most. She said, the only reason you should do a PhD is because it would open doors for you. It would open doors. And that's absolutely, for me, that was the power of the PhD is that, you know what it's like to get on a stage, to be invited to speak at conferences. The PhD or the MD is always going to get on the stage first. Anyway, so those are my three. Now, those are my three amazing mentors who are still part of my life.
Oh, I love this. I feel like everyone wants to go join your community so that perchance they can hear more of these stories and get the mentorship. We're going to talk about your community because I think that's equally as important as talking about 3x4 Genetics, the report that's on Rupa and Fullscript. I want you to take us, though, from Colorado. So you're in Colorado, you're thinking, you have this history of thinking, I want to be the person to choose the genes, right? So how do you get from Colorado working for this company to now where you are today with 3x4?
Well, we don't have enough time, so I'm going to try to think of the short version. So I left Colorado. I went back to South Africa to finish my PhD because I had to spend a few years in the lab. I couldn't do it. It wasn't like online PhDs like you could do now. So I had to be in the lab for a few years. While I was doing my PhD, I decided I wanted to have a child. So I was pregnant and exhausted and doing my PhD, and I needed some work to pay the bills. I was approached by someone called Dr. Danny Mayersfeld, who owns a company called DNA Life, which is another genetic testing company in the US. I think it's also on Rupa, if I'm not mistaken. And he said, I want to build nutrigenomic tests. I've got a lab, but I don't have anyone to build them. Will you build them for me? And I'm like, no, I'm pregnant. I'm exhausted. I'm doing a PhD. Anyway, and I had a consulting job at the time. And he would fly. He lived in Johannesburg. I lived in Cape Town. And he would fly every 2 weeks. And I said, but I'm happy to share my experience with you. So, come for coffee and I'll tell you everything that I think we did well, everything I think we did badly, why the industry is battling, how you need to do things. Anyway, I think for, 6 months or something, he flew to Cape Town for coffee every couple of weeks. And we would talk about why we thought the industry was battling and how we could, eventually, the long story is the job that I had, I lost. And so I phoned him up and I said, okay, I'm desperate. I'm coming to work with you. So I landed up being the person who built the genetic test for DNA Live. Then I went and built the education company, Manuka Science, with Christine, teaching clinicians how to translate it. Then I opened a clinic called the Center for Translational Genomics because I wanted to see how what I was teaching played out in practice. So you can teach and teach, but does it work? So we built this clinic where we had this idea that every single patient had to do a genetic test as they couldn't come to the clinic. And everyone said, no one will come, no one will come. Anyway, it was a great success. And we learned a lot about how to use genetics in practice and not just build a test. I was learning the clinical side, the education side, and how do you build a test, the gene side. And this kind of led me to 3x4 because I was now in education, in clinical practice, and I know how to build a genetic test. And I was like, we're not getting it right. We're not getting it right as an industry. It's not personal. It's not one company or another. As a whole genetic testing industry, I actually thought we had done a pretty shitty job. And when I look at where I started in 2000 to where I was in 2015, I was like, that's not good. Like, we didn't actually improve that much. And I was quite devastated. I call it the dark night of my genetic soul because I was so disappointed that 15 years in, we had so little to show. Patients were not engaged with their genes. They weren't getting, the value. Clinicians were battling to use the tests. They were taking hours to find what to do with the genes. They didn't understand how to translate them. The reports looked terrible. I was like, how do we not succeed in this amazing world of genetics? So I took off a year to kind of figure out, where did I go wrong? Where did the industry go wrong? Why didn't we do better? And I had to make a decision. Like, either I step out and kind of give up. I would have stayed in education because I love teaching, but I would have closed the clinic and I would have stopped building tests. And I'm just like, I'm just going to focus on teaching and that's it. So step out or step in. And step in was, how do I step in and try to fix all of this? Like, how do I build something better? Anyway, it took a year. And as I always do, I go traveling. I went to a lot of conferences that were not medical conferences. They were not nutrition conferences. They were like design thinking, user experience conferences. They were gamification conferences, just to try see how other industries were solving problems, Anyway, after a year, I was like, you know what? I can't give up. I'm too young to give up now. I'm stepping in. And so that's where the dream of 3x4 came from, is how do you build a company where you look at every single thing where you feel like you're failing and you try and fix it? So it's not like you're better you're reimagining technology. It wasn't that. It was just like, how do we do education? How do we do mentorship? How do we do the report? How do we do the science? Every single thing, how do we do it better? And so that's where the dream of 3x4 came from, is building a company that wasn't just a test, it was an ecosystem that irrespective of whether you're a dietitian who's never heard the word gene or SNP before, or you're a doctor who doesn't know anything about nutrition, genetics, it doesn't matter who you are. You can join in this ecosystem and feel safe and feel held and feel educated and feel nurtured and have a report that's really easy to use. It's engaging for your patients. You grow as everything. And that's where 3x4 came from. And that's where 3x4 community came from.
I love hearing the story behind this. Your report is so different and so interactive and laid out so intentionally with the pathways. Why did you call the company 3x4? And let's be clear, everyone, is that 3x4?
It's not 3x4. It's not 3 and 4. It's 3x4. I always say ex-boyfriend, X4. When I had my education company, I built this course with Christine. And the thing Christine and I were trying to figure out is, how do we take genetics and distill it so it's very easy for a clinician to use? So we had this thing that we wanted a one-pager. A one-pager. How do you get to looking at someone's genes and get one page? And what we wanted this page to be is, what are the 3 most important areas you want to focus on? Detox, inflammation, glucose, insulin, histamine, hormones. What are the 3 things? I would say 20% intervention, 80% impact, where you're going to have the greatest impact. What are the 3 most important diet interventions you can use with this patient? Because we all know you can't give them 50 things to do. They're going to be like, go home and walk away from it. So 3 most important areas, 3 most important diet interventions, 3 most important lifestyle interventions, 3 most important supplements. And it may be 4, it may be 5, but you get the thing. So it's 3, 3, 3, 3, 3x4.
Brilliant. And your report is designed around this.
That's right. So we took the learning from the course and I built the test report around the learning from the course. So that's the connection between the course. But I have another good story for you. So the report looks different, right?
It's beautiful.
So one of the mistakes we make, and you're in the testing industry, so you know this. If you look at tests, they often look the same. And a lot of them will look like a LabCorp or Quest report, it's data. And we don't learn that way. We know as clinicians, that's not how we learn. Everyone will tell you, I learn through pictures, I learn through analogies, I learn through stories. And yet our reports do not reflect that. So one of the problems is that scientists build tests or clinicians build tests. It doesn't matter, science clinicians. But actually, we know nothing about engagement, user engagement. That's not what we studied, right? So I realized that the mistake I'd been making for 15 years was that I was building the tests, but actually I knew nothing about how do we engage my patient in content. So I one of my big epiphanies, I had a few, but one of them was like, I need to step back from this test. I can do the science part, but I am really not the right person to build the report. So I went looking for someone to help me, and I found this company. It's called Sea Monster in South Africa, who's specialized in behavioral gamification. So behavioral gamification is I'm going to employ all these gamification techniques to change someone's behavior, whether it's changing how they learn, changing the way they spend their money, changing the way that they use an app. Like, how do you get people to change behavior? In this case, health behavior. So I book an appointment to go meet the founder of this company, the CEO. And I arrive there and I've got like 20 genetic tests in a pile. Every PDF of any test I've ever seen, they all look the same. And I get into, and the receptionist says, oh, he'll see you now. If you could just sit on the couch in the reception area, and would you like a glass of water? And I'm like, okay, fine. Anyway, so he comes through late. He comes through. I wait like 20 minutes. He comes through and he sits on the couch. Now, no, he doesn't take me through to an office, nothing. He sits on the couch with my little glass of water and he goes, oh, hi, someone recommended I should take this meeting with you. I don't even know what it's about. That kind of like, I don't even know what it's about, but I've got 5 minutes for you. So I said to him, well, here's 20 genetic tests that look absolutely awful, and I want to build something that's really meaningful, and here's why. And I give him my whole pitch, and he goes, oh, that sounds amazing. Let's go to my office. So we go to, and he goes, would you like a cup of coffee? And I was like, okay, exactly. Anyway, so, and then he's calling in all his staff. He goes, come hear this. She wants to build an interactive, engaging genetic test experience. Anyway, so it's a funny story because not only did they land up being my partner, in the beginning, they were like, I built the company, they owned 50% of the company because I didn't know I have any other way of doing it. But they helped me build this report with pictures and storytelling and infographics and colors. But the funniest part of the whole story is that this CEO, Glenn Gillis, who sat with me on the couch, turns out he's my second cousin.
What?
How's that? And we worked together for a year before we figured it out. Yeah.
Are you serious? How did you figure it out?
My mother's family produced a book on the family tree. And she gave me a copy. And I was sitting there one Friday night with my mom and I was saying, hey, there's a Gillis in here. And she goes, yeah, of course. Her father's brother was a Gillis. And I was like, but I'm working with Glenn Gillis. She goes, oh, he's your cousin.
Mom.
Yeah. How did you not? Anyway, I obviously never told her the name of the person I was working with. Anyway, isn't that a great story?
So great. Man, talk about destiny.
Totally. Anyway, so that's the report. So that's why the report looks different. So I always say, like, build the science and get out of the way because we're not meant to build reports where we can build science, but that's, our brains work differently.
I'm curious how you feel now kind of watching all the AI and even like, ChatGPT, you can design things now. We're really democratizing access to design in a way that we never have. And I'm curious, like, kind of what you want to see in the industry moving forward. Obviously, you have gold standard with what you want to do with Nutrigenomics, but what do you want to see in the industry?
Do you know that I actually don't have an answer for you? I am learning. I don't know much about AI, so I'm learning. I'm reading Nexus, very, very terrifying book to read. Um, I don't have a good idea yet about how I'm starting to get a sense of how it can change it, but I'm always on that like good, bad, good, bad, good, bad, and we have a lot of conversations in 3x4 about the role of AI. We have like 5 human geneticists who sit and read papers and stuff. We've never used search engines to drive our science. We've always held on to that human brain kind of thing. So it's a big adjustment and thinking about how this is going to change things for us. As an example, our company launched, 3x4 launched in Japan. And we had to translate everything we had into Japanese, which is a big job. And you can get an AI. You can use ChatGPT to translate, but you can get a very sophisticated version of AI to translate. So we were able to translate. So we hired a full-time translator, but we translated everything into Japanese using AI, and then the translator sat and went through it and finessed it to make sure that it was appropriate and made sense. And I was like, so we did in 3 months what probably would have taken us 2 years. It's amazing. So in that way, you're like, oh, this is amazing. But in terms of like how it's going to change design thinking, how it's going to change recommendations, how it's going to change personalizing, what role does the clinician make? How much can AI do before that? I just can't get my head around yet. I feel like I'm still early days for me, trying to process. I don't actually know the answer for that.
That's interesting. I feel like it's interesting for me thinking about all the mundane tasks we can take off people's plates. But I think for you being in the field of genetics, it must be quite an extra layer to think about with AI.
Yeah, I mean, the mundane stuff I'm loving, like captures your meetings and translates for you. And that stuff is amazing. I think it's about the role of the clinician. I think it's about the recommendations we give. I like the conversation of how do you create an AI loop that has a human in it? So 80% of it is being done by AI, but there's still 20% human. And that's the part that I like, and I think I'm heading towards. But the idea of, and I do, people say to me, what career should I follow? And I'm like, you need to be careful in making choices for your career right now. You could study for 7 years or 15 years and land up with nothing. So I think I'm glad that I'm not having to make that decision in my career, because I think, and I have this conversation with my kids all the time, like my son is a great artist and he's really worried about art and music and what happens so I am like flipping and flopping all over on AI. I think that maybe in a year I'll have a better sense of it. But it's going to change our lives fundamentally. It's going to change Rupert, Fullscript, 3x4 Genetics. It's going to change us as clinicians. It's going to change PhD work. It's just going to change everything. And I just, I don't think we even have a concept yet of, and again, it comes back to that 3x4 community. Connection is everything, and we know this, right? Gene expression, loneliness, isolation, the COVID times is devastating on gene expression and our health. And so how do we navigate this AI world but maintain connection and community? And I think, people always say, like, what's the thing you're most proud of? And it would probably be 3x4 community.
Really?
Yeah, I think so. It's a special place with amazing people. It's safe, it's nurturing, it's kind. We're all learning together. No one's the expert. It's not a top-down model. It's not like I know everything and you know nothing. It's not like that at all. Clinicians work together to give answers. it's, one of the problems with nutrition, that is my opinion anyway, is that organizations try and own it. Whether it's a dietetics association or a nutrition association, they're like, our way of doing nutrition is right. And I just don't think that's true. I think that, so what I've tried to do in 3x4 is to democratize the learning of nutrigenomics. So you can join 3x4 community and you don't even have to sell 3x4 tests. You can sell any of our competitors with absolute pleasure and come learn with us. Because if we don't create a safe learning space where everyone is learning in a different way at a different speed, and I'm saying with like, it's multidisciplinary. I don't care if you're a health coach, you're a psychiatrist, you're a dentist, you're a physical therapist, you're a DC, I don't mind. I think we need to break down, I always say we need to break down the moats around the castle and create a place where you can feel safe and not overwhelmed, intimidated, or made to be felt stupid. And you don't have to pay a huge amount to be in that. And I think that's what, Rupa University done an amazing job about creating a learning platform that people can come in and be held and learn. So I think there's some great stuff happening in education, but I really believe education should happen in the community rather than in individual silos. Yeah.
It has to, because there's 33 million papers on PubMed. No one person can know it all. You have to be able to, and the gamification of it, I think, will increasingly be around community, because that is what the commodity is. When education is everywhere and when there's too much of it, what do you need? You need people to learn with, and you need the clinical expertise to come in and say, like, how do you actually frame all this information? How does it actually translate in the clinic and in your client's body? So I love what you guys have built. And when we did our first education together, we sent everybody over to your community, because it was just like, this is where you're really going to learn it. Like, you're gonna learn the science, but what you want is then you run into a roadblock in practice, or you run into questions. And it's such a privilege to be able to send somebody to a complete learning environment where they have friends and they get to ask questions. So I'm curious from you. There are millions of genes. I am so interested in how you chose the ones you did. Clearly these are the ones with the most evidence and clinical impact, but like, what was that journey like? And has this test evolved over the years?
It has evolved over the years, but actually, that is the great challenge of genetics, is how do you choose what SNP to include in your genetic test? And I always say to, clinicians, if you interviewing, and you should be interviewing a genetic testing company to decide which one you want to use, here's a list of questions that you should ask them. And one of the most important questions, one of them, is how do you choose your genes to include? Because we're in a data world now. I could build a test tomorrow with 700,000 SNPs in for the same price as 3x4. Not going to be useful in any way. Just not going to help you, right? So we need to get away from this idea that data is value, that the more data you have, the greatest value. So we're the complete opposite of that. So we ask the question, what is the most clinically valuable gene that we can include? So that we're not selling it, because I would say it doesn't matter what you pay for data. If it's just data and it has no value, it's expensive. Doesn't matter if you paid $15, it's $15 that was not valuable to your patient, right? So I built this methodology called Darwin. And it's called Darwin because the concept is only the fittest genes survive to get in the test. And so we're that company who are super conservative about letting in a SNP into our report. I always say, if it's in the 3x4 report, I'll stand on a stage at a conference and defend it. We almost like all our SNPs are our friends. And so we built a methodology based on a validated methodology in the literature, but adapted it to be about translation. And it's got all the stuff you mentioned, great science, replicated studies, good stats, in vivo, in vitro, all of that. That goes without saying, right? But for me, having great science is a checkbox. It doesn't qualify you to get into 3x4, but it is a checkbox. So the part where we differentiate ourselves and where I really think I really stand by is this concept of clinical utility, which is how clinically useful will this be for me in making or fine-tuning or personalizing an intervention for my patient. And there's a couple of things you want to think about. So one is, does a gene variant or a SNP change biochemistry or physiology in some way? Because if it doesn't change something in the body, you have the potential of just having a data conversation. Because the GWAS studies, which are the majority of genetic studies, can have 100,000 SNPs in. So just because it's in a study doesn't mean it's meaningful to you. So the first thing is, it's got to change biochemistry or physiology. It's got to have a biomarker associated with it. And this is our beautiful relationship with Rupa and with Fullscript Labs, is genetics is the why, the biomarker is the what. So you do a test and you get the what is the status of the body, but why am I seeing it? Look at the genetics. So I love the two together, right? What is the biomarker? And we talk and teach a lot about the relationship between the thing we're testing, whether it's urine or blood or a hormone, it doesn't matter, and the genes as being the why am I seeing. Then is there a phenotype associated with it? So this SNP, is it associated with something in our body, whether it's lipid metabolism, whether it's glucose insulin, whether it's hormones, like neurotransmitters, what is it associated with? What is the phenotype? And then lastly is there an intervention? So if I have this information, is there something I can do? So we score, when I started the company, I had 1,400 SNPs to evaluate. That 1,400 that got past scientific validity, like good science. And we landed up with, like, I think when I launched the company, it was 113. Now we're on 174. So that's how strict we are, that if there isn't value for you, we're not putting it in. And I have been, I won't say attacked because that's a strong word, but been held accountable of why do you not have that SNP in your report? And we always say we live and die by Darwin. If it didn't pass, if it wasn't valuable enough, we're not going to put it in just because every other genetic testing company in the world has it in their report. We stand by.
Love that. I think that's very powerful. And there's a reason that people come to your test for that, who want to know the so what, right? Like, yeah, okay, this is not a party trick where we're telling you about your SNPs. There's actually something we're going to do that's going to have an impact on your health as a result of the time we're going to spend, the money we're going to spend on this test. There are clinically important takeaways that we're going to have, and there are changes to your life that you're going to notice. And I think that's a really cool promise of this test. And even the way you kind of display the results and the impact, like connotations that you have. Do you want to describe how that looks to someone who's never seen this report? What are they going to see in terms of impact?
Well, so we do a couple of things to make it easier. The first is we're polygenic, very important, right? So we don't just look at MTHFR and say, hey, you've got MTHFR, take all these supplements, this is what's happening. No, methylation is complex. It's a whole biochemical process with lots of genes. So we're polygenic. So we look at 36 biochemical processes. We look at all the genes that happen and we score the genes and say, what are the genes in detox? What are the genes? And then we score them together to figure out how they're impacting your patient. To denote impact, we use color. So wherever the genes are having a very high impact, we use dark purple, a high impact purple, blue is medium. So we have these beautiful colors, dark purple, purple, blue, and yellow, because I don't want to have a red conversation. We're not medical genetics. We're not diagnostic. We're not saying, hey, you have this gene, you're going to get breast cancer. Not at all. This is about diet and lifestyle, environmental exposure, stress, trauma, exercise, all of that. So we use these very beautiful colors, which I really love. And we always say, if you just follow the purple, so in your report, genetics report, you will always see these colors. And we always teach our clinicians, just follow the purple. If you just follow the purple, it's super easy to see where the genes are having the greatest impact and where you want to put your emphasis. Remember, we want to find those areas. And we usually say, follow the purple and go upstream. Start at those cellular areas, detox, inflammation, oxidative methylation. And then go down to a systems level and then go down. So we use color to show you easily where the genes are impacting. and we use polygenic scores to be able to get that big picture view. One of my colleagues describes it as the drone that's flying over the forest. What's happening with my patient? Where's the impact? And then you land the drone and you're in the trees, and now you can look at the genes afterwards. So it's not that we don't look at the SNPs, we do. But first we want to have that kind of big picture view of, but where are the genes impacting? And we don't use the word risk. I only use the word impact. Where are the genes impacting your patient? Not because risk is a calculation, and we're not of risk. Your chance of prostate cancer is X. We don't do that. We just want to talk about whether the impact is.
I think it's brilliant. And for those of you who have seen this test, you're familiar with even the pathway-based results page, where you're going to see the impact displayed in one page, like you talked about. And it really does help orient you to, of all the things you could talk with your client about nutrition, what are the top 5 you're going to start with? And I think this is so useful for guiding conversations around clinical nutrition, which is everything, which is biochemistry, which is medicine, in my opinion, because it can feel quite overwhelming. And there's so much value in this for the client who's saying, I'm doing everything right and I'm still struggling. Why is that? Which is many of our clients, right? Like they're doing paleo, they're doing time restricted feeding. Your test gives them a lot of insight into what is actually optimal for you based on your SNPs. And I think it's so powerful.
Agreed. And just, I know we've been talking for a long time, but just to finish, genetics isn't an absolute, and genetics doesn't have all the answers. So we never say like, oh, you only need a genetic test. That's all you need. It's not that. It's not that at all. Genetics is just a really amazing, insightful, informative, and fun and interesting piece of the puzzle. But we never claim that we have all the answers. But often we have some answers that you don't know. So we say we don't know what we don't know. So I just wanted to put that in perspective, that it's not that genetics is the only answer or gives you all the answer. It's just part of the answer.
I'm curious, for a clinician who's never ordered a report from 3x4 or even a report about epigenetics or SNPs, like what is the indication? What should raise their clinical suspicion that this report might be helpful for their client?
So I'll give you five reasons to order a genetic test. And I always say, if you're not sure, order 2 on 2 different patients, join our community, go through mentorship, and then at the end of it decide, whether I was right or not. Anyway, so why would you do it? 1, genetics helps you understand where to start, right? 20% intervention for 80% impact. Where am I going to get the biggest bang for my buck by working with this patient? So 1 is know where to start. 2, know what you don't know. We could speak for an hour about know what you don't know. I'm a great clinician. I've done a whole lot of stuff and I'm still missing something. It very well could be sitting in the genetics, right? So know what you don't know. Number 3, precision testing, all right? Rupa, full script labs. So we say genetics is a screening tool. It's a $2.99, whatever the price is, once off test for life. And based on what I see in the genetics, remember, genetics is the why, testing is the what, I can make really good decisions about what other labs to order. Or if I have labs, I can understand those labs a lot more because genetics gives them the why. But we always say you can use it as a screening tool to be more precise about which tests to order for your patient. Next one, personalizing of diet and lifestyle recommendations. So you can use genetics to really optimize what those recommendations are. You're all great clinicians, but how do we really make it about the patient and personalize it? And the last one, very full script conversation, targeted supplementation. So we're a food first company. We always want to go food first, but we love supplements. We just want to make sure that if we're using a supplement, we know why we're using it and we know what the supplement's going to do. Because supplements can be incredibly powerful to change gene expression and be so healing. So we just want to understand, why are we choosing that supplement? What is it doing? And how powerful is it? Because if you're very specific with your supplements, they can be incredibly powerful. So those are all the different reasons. And it's like, That's quite a lot of good reasons for
Oh,
using
yeah.
a test.
Okay, can you give us an example of like a supplement recommendation that might change or a dietary recommendation that might change based on the results that somebody gets back for a client? Like,
Yeah, I mean, detox is always a good one. We all know we need to, eat vegetables, eat cruciferous vegetables, but you can get a genetic test back and it'll give you information into both phase 1 and phase 2 detoxification. And detox is kind of interesting because in phase 1, you're kind of getting all these toxins either from inside your body or outside your body and kind of activating them. When you've got these kind of intermediate metabolites, they're actually at the most dangerous. And that's when they are doing the most amount of damage to your DNA, to your cell membranes. And so phase 2 is so important because you've got to clear it. That's when you kind of take that activated toxin and you either conjugate it to something and get it out of the body. So we hear the stories about people who smoke until they're 100 and then kind of die in their bed. And, how come they smoke? They didn't get cancer. Well, a lot of it is how do we metabolize these toxins that are either from our environment, from our food, from generated by our body. So our genes give us insight into how efficient we are in terms of detoxification in both phase 1 and phase 2. So you can be very efficient in phase 1, which means you're switching on all these activated metabolites, but really sluggish in phase 2, which means that you've got a lot of these metabolites sitting around doing damage because your body isn't able to clear it. So genes give us insight into how fast or slow that's happening. And based on that, we can then customize an intervention to be able to say, in this example I just gave, where phase 1 is fast, but phase 2 is slow, we really want to activate phase 2. And phase 2 detox, there's a lot of stuff you can do. So by knowing the genes that were kind of impacting how sluggish that phase 2 is, we can now use food and supplements to upregulate NRF2, the GST genes, to switch on phase 2 to try clear the toxins. And, broccoli, cauliflower, all amazing as long as it's raw. If not, we need to think of broccoli sprouts. If not, we need to think of a supplement that can really switch on NRF2. So this is how we use genetics as insight to drive kind of personalization of both nutrition, but also of supplements.
I think that's a brilliant example. And there's over 100 more that we could give. I'm thrilled that we're going to be doing a course together in a few weeks. And it's going to be taught by you and your experts. We have the interactive report on Rupa.
And the clinical guide, which is an interactive Nutrigenomics textbook, also on Rupa.
So great. So you can really click through and interact with the report, as the name suggests, which I think is much more powerful. It helps people have more of a journey rather than, as you explained, with a lot of reports, you get back the entire report, your eyes kind of start to glaze over. If you're new to it, it can feel a bit overwhelming. You have this gamification system set up in the ordering platform, which is huge. So I am really excited for that course. I'm really proud to have this test on the platform and really thrilled to have heard more of this story that I hadn't heard many parts of this story before. It's such a cool story that you have of you and yourself personally and this test in your community. So I'm curious, what did we not cover, or what do you want to leave our audience with today?
Sure. We covered a lot. We really covered a lot. I think, I would just say, if anyone's still listening at this point, everyone has a different journey to walk in genetics. And, don't feel that because you're not an expert in this space, or you think you may be an expert, you're not sure, or you're working with another test that this isn't something you can do. Everyone can work with genetics. Just know that you can dip your toe in. You can join the community and hang out with us and not sell a genetics test until you're ready. You can sell, just as I always say, just do two and use our mentors. Everyone walks a different journey. And if someone else sounds really smart and they know a lot about genetics, doesn't matter. No one learns this stuff in curricula. No one. There is no course where you can learn the stuff. So, I always just say, come join the community, come hang out with us, watch some videos. Because no one is turned away. It doesn't matter what your discipline is. It doesn't matter what your experience is. It doesn't matter if you're seeing patients. It doesn't matter if you're using genetics. Like, genetics is part of everything we do and will continue to be part of everything we do. So I always say, don't be a dinosaur. Don't be left behind. It's like AI. Don't be left behind. Yeah. And just come and join us. 3x4 community.
Love it. Thank you so much, Dr. Yael, for being here today.
And thanks, Dr. Gear, for having me.